Hello, everybody. We're continuing with the laws of prayer, laws of davening, weekly class. We are on for those that have the Mishnah Berurah, we're on the Mishnah Berurah Kuf Aleph, Halacha Beis, which is 101.2, and we're discussing the laws of how to pray and different details that come up when praying. And primarily, we're in the section which deals with the Shemona Esrei prayer. The Shemona Esrei is the silent Amida. Hello. Thanks for joining us. The silent Amida is the prayer that we say at this. It's the centerpiece of each service of Shachris Mincha Marv. It's said silently, and that is the main part of davening, and that was established by the men of the Great Assembly. And there are many rules and guidelines how that prayer should be davened, and it's the same prayer every time. Again, it's different for Shabbos and holidays and whatnot, but during the week it's the same. That doesn't preclude that we don't pray spontaneously from our hearts when we have a question or a need or something like that, and we want to praise Hashem spontaneously. That's it's also very important. But we will be talking about the laws of that Shemona Esrei prayer. So we're on 101.2. Now this is, if you have the Mishnah Berurah and you want to follow along, that's great. Oh, hello. And if not, you can just listen, but this is more of like a text-based class. Okay. Lo yispala b'libo levad, ela mechatech hadvarm b'sfasav, umashmiya la'aznov b'lachash. When one prays, he shouldn't just pray in his heart, but rather he should move his lips when he davens, when he prays. Right? So where we say Baruch Atah Hashem, right? Just don't say the prayers. You can't just think the prayers. That's not enough. They actually have to be spoken, and they have to be spoken loud enough so that you could hear. Umashmiya la'aznav b'lachash, but it should be done quietly. V'lo yashmiya kolo, and you shouldn't raise your voice. You shouldn't make your voice too loud. Oh, hi Lorinda. Thanks for joining. Pleasure to see you. If you're not able to have kavana, intent, if you daven too quietly, you're allowed to raise your voice. So when are you allowed to raise your voice when you daven? That's only when you're praying by yourself. When you're praying at home, you're not going to distract anybody. But if you are davening with a congregation, you're in synagogue, you're not allowed to pray too loud because it's going to, he says, it's going to distract people. So really the best way to pray is quietly, just so that you can hear your voice, right? Baruch Atah Hashem, right? But it shouldn't be that other people shouldn't be able to hear you. Now, if you're at home and by raising your voice it helps you to concentrate, that you can do. But you can't raise your voice in synagogue because that's going to distract people, right? Some people, such as myself, have a very hard time focusing on davening when other people are davening loud next to them. Oh, I just want to say, we give a lot of shiurim daily for the new people who are joining us. So if you are interested in signing up, we give on Jewish law, on the path of the just, Mesillas Yesharim, Derech Hashem, Lashon Hara. And if any of that interests you, just feel free to shoot me an email. I'm going to post my email here in the comments on Facebook. And please feel free to send me an email what kind of classes you are interested in, or if you want to learn one-on-one, let me know. Okay, so let's continue. Now, if you daven loud in your house, but the reason you're doing it is also to teach your children the prayers, that they should hear the prayers, that is also permitted. Okay, so that was the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. Let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah. Then the Mishnah Berurah explains the words, based on his understanding of all the poskim, all the decisors of Jewish law. He explains what the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah are talking about. Oh, and also when we are doing the class, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments or send me an email after. Umashmiya v'yesha kasu d'tzarich lachush l'divrei hazohar she'af lechatchila leishmiya la'aznav. That the Zohar actually says one should daven so softly that he can't even hear himself. Of Lamagen Avram kasav she'ein ra'im hazohar v'chein kasav be'er agrad da'av das hazohar hu k'shulchan aruch v'chein kasav sharei chronim she'tov yoser lechatchila she'yashmi la'aznav. So he says that even though some say from the Zohar that one shouldn't daven even loud enough that you could hear yourself, nevertheless, the Zohar doesn't really seem like he's saying that, and one should practically should daven just loud enough that he could hear himself pray. Ubediavad, let's say you didn't. Let's say you davened very low and you didn't hear yourself. If you daven so low that you can't even hear yourself, but you still verbalize the words, then you fulfilled your obligation. So again, lechatchila, meaning preferably one should daven loud enough that he could hear himself pray. However, if one did not daven that loud, then as long as he verbalized the words, then he fulfilled his obligation. So it sounds like if he just thought the words, though, and he didn't verbalize them at all, then he didn't fulfill his obligation of prayer. Right? The Shemona Esrei prayer has to actually be verbalized with the lips. It's not enough, right, to just think of the words. Vav lo yashmiya dichsiv betfila chana. So where does this come from? Where do we come from that you have to verbalize prayer? Why isn't it enough just to think? So the verse says, Rak svaseha naos v'kol lo yishamea. It says by Chana, when Chana was davening, right? Most of the laws of davening in brachos are learnt out from Chana when she was davening for a child, and the verse says that her lips were moving, but you could not hear her voice. So that's the way we daven. We learned out the davening from her, all the davenings from Chana. And she moved her lips again, and she was not able to hear her. You were not able to hear her voice. V'chol hamashmiya kol betfilaso. And it actually says something negative about somebody who davens too loud. It says that if you daven too loud, it is like that you have little faith in Hashem. Why? Because someone who doesn't daven loud, it's making it seem that if you were daven softly, that Hashem wouldn't be able to hear you. And apparently, I believe, he says that, and he says, whoever davens very loud is from the false prophets. He says, because what they used to do for avodah zarah, for idolatry, idol worshippers, they used to yell out to their idols. So one who davens loud, that's very bad. He's like the idolaters. And also, he was making it like that he believes that Hashem can't hear him unless he davens very loud. Obviously, Hashem can hear everything. Hashem even knows our thoughts, right? But we learn out from Chana that we should still verbalize it, and our lips should move. He writes, the Birkei Yosef says that one should daven. We actually mentioned this a little bit already. That one should daven so softly that his friend next to him shouldn't be able to hear him. So, what's the proper volume of prayer? The proper volume is one's lips should move. He should be able to hear what he's saying, but his friend next to him should not be able to hear him. Now, if you have now that everyone's social distancing, when they're davening in a minyan, this should be a lot easier because not everyone's standing on top of each other. But like Yom Kippur, it could be a challenge. Everyone's very, very close, packed close together. When we call makam, so he writes, now, if davening that softly, you're not able to have kavanah, you're not able to have intent, then you could raise your voice a little bit. Now, one condition when you could raise your voice, like we said before, you can't raise your voice to the point where it's going to bother somebody else. And very often in shul, sometimes you'll have, people that have the guts or chutzpah to shush you if you daven too loud. But most people are shy and won't say anything if you are davening too loud. So best to err on the side of caution and not daven too loud, because it's not good to annoy someone during prayers, right? Here we are davening to Hashem, asking for Hashem for all our needs. And if we don't have the small modicum of respect, and we're not worried about the comfort and focus of our fellow Jews while they're praying, then I imagine that Hashem does not look kindly upon that. So always remember to, even though you might have a better personal spiritual experience by praying loudly, if that can't be done at the expense of people around you. And again, you have every shul is different, because some shuls everyone davens very loudly. So that's just the way they do it. Okay, kolo va'afilu b'psuka de zimra. Even in Pesuka de Zimra, Tov Shelo Laharim Kol, you shouldn't daven too loud. Yekadosh Baruch Hu Shemei Balachash, God hears you when you daven softly. Loka Oz Magbia Kol Yosem Midai. So Pesuka de Zimra again is the part of the service in the morning, which is from Baruch She'amar until Yishtabach, which are the Tehillim and the songs of praise that we praise Hashem. So even those, that's a very emotional part of davening. That part of davening is meant to awaken our emotions. We read about the glory of Hashem and how much the glory of God and what God can do and how He takes care of the world. It's meant to awaken the emotions. So sometimes people might get carried away and daven very loud. But he says even here one should not daven louder than is appropriate. Umiu b'Shabbos. However, on Shabbos, shenogim she'echad omer pesukah d'zimmer b'kol ram shaper dami. However, when you have on Shabbos that they would have the chazan, I guess they used to have the chazan would daven loudly with everybody, so then that person could do it. Obviously, balachash quietly hataz kasav de'afim yachol lechavim balachash aval lo kol kach kamo b'kol mikra en yachol lechavim yachol ispal b'yachad b'kol and bir lachash kasam de'in lahakol bazeh. Oh, very interesting. He says that even if you could just, according to the Taz, if you could just daven, like have a little more focus, if you daven a little louder, then you're allowed to pick up your voice when you're at home. Again, not in the synagogue because it'll distract people. But he says to look at the Bir Halacha, you really should not be lenient regarding this. So it sounds like one should daven quietly no matter what. Like bi kolo va'ari dafilu im yashmiya kolo b'miktas gam ken lo yichol lechavin de'ilav hochi aser. Okay, but tzibur aser afilu lahashmiya kolo b'miktas v'kol shchein like bi kolo. He writes in the in shul, one should not daven loudly at all, and for sure not very loudly. Right? You shouldn't even pick up your voice a little bit because that will distract people. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. Okay, so let's go to Halacha Gimel in the Shulchan Aruch. He says, Yesh Omrim Shabarosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur mutar lashmiya kolim b'tfila afilu b'tzibur. So there are those that say that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, one can daven loudly, even in the congregation. Right? You'll notice this that in yeshivas that they daven even louder on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We're going to explain why shortly. And that's the custom. He says, Midai. However, he says, the Ramah writes that even that you're supposed to daven loudly, or you can daven loudly Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, you shouldn't overdo it. Still shouldn't overdo it. Okay, let's do Mishnah Berurah Gimel. Afilu b'tzibur, la'or hakavana. What's the reason? To awaken the kavana, right? Very often when you daven loudly and you're saying the words outside, that causes a person to focus more on the prayers. Oh, so this is very interesting here. He says, what's the difference? Why is it that people will not be distracted if you daven loudly on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but you will during the rest of the year? So he says in the rest of the year, I don't know if, he says Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah people have machzorim, whereas in the rest of the year people don't always pray from the siddur. Very often people pray by heart because they say it every day, they know the prayers by heart. But Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, where people need to have the book in front of them, they're not going to get as distracted easily because they're looking at the book. V'ayim b'magen Avram demasik diyoser tov lehis palo balachashim yachol lechavin v'chein kasu harbe achronim. But the Magen Avram says, nevertheless, even Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, if you could have kavana, if you could have the same intent while davening softly, it's better to daven softly. It's interesting. Just most people do need a machzer, and I'm just thinking out loud now. If anyone has seen anything on this, that most people nowadays, I would say, for a good portion of the prayers, let's say you're in a shul where people use a siddur, would the same halacha apply maybe during the rest of the year, that you could raise your voice a little bit because you're not going to distract people as it would during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Because it sounds like the way he's speaking that pretty much nobody had a siddur back in the day. I imagine also siddurim were more scarce in Europe, but Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur everyone had a machzer. I was just thinking that Rav Shaftel Neuberger, who davens every year in Ner Yisrael, he recorded himself davening Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davenings. If you want to hear it, it's on the Ner Yisrael website, nerk.edu. And I was told that he recorded it when he was driving from Baltimore to New York. Meaning he was davening the whole thing by heart, the whole Chazin's long thing, repetition from Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur by heart, which is very impressive. But he does it every year, has a beautiful voice. And yeah. So I guess some people do know the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur prayers by heart. I am not one of them. Okay, Yosef Midai, we said even on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur one should not daven more loudly than usual. It says that this was the practice of the Nevi'ei Sheker and the Nevi'ei Habal, like we said, right? The story with Eliyahu Hanavi, where the people in the movement of the Baal, they got a lot of the Jewish people, unfortunately, to worship idols, and they would yell when they would do their service. So we don't want to imitate them. Inami, alternatively, and the other reason, the more practical reason, that if you daven very loud, even if it's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, yes, and even if they have the siddur, you're going to distract people. The chazanim shemagbiim kolim kedei laora kavano lashmiya shaper advarim shaper avde the iker tfilas shliach tzibor nitkana davka b'kol ram achein osum sheosum kin kedei laharos kolam vade osum shlo kahogan. He says, however, the chazan who is davening for the congregation, his whole purpose is to lead the davening. So he, of course, should daven loud, especially now when we're having minyanim outside. It's definitely important to daven loud so you can make sure to hear everything the chazan is saying. But Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the shliach tzibor should daven loud, and we're not worried about the Nevi'ei HaSheker, I guess, apparently being similar to the false prophets, because the whole purpose of the Shliach Tzibor is to daven for the congregation, and he should daven with feeling to inspire the rest of the congregation. He says for sure the Chazan should not just sing loud to show off his voice. That's very bad. The Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah, and other places talk about that if one's leading the prayers, one's intent should be that he's serving as a messenger for the congregation, and that he wants to make a Kiddush Hashem and to daven in front of Hashem. He definitely should not pray to show off his voice. It's very arrogant and very, very bad for a chazan to do that. But we're learning here that, so again, just to summarize what we learned so far, that when one is davening, he should daven loud enough that he or she should be able to hear their own prayers with their ears. They should not daven loud enough to that someone else could hear them and distract them. And Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, one could daven a little louder, but not too loud to distract somebody. And it sounds like that if your intent would be the same if you can daven lower, according to Magen Avraham, you should daven lower. But the main lesson we learn here is, a few lessons, but one is that Hashem can hear us even when we whisper, but we should still make sure to verbalize the prayers, and we shouldn't just think them. And also we have to be very careful when we're praying that just because we're having a religious experience and our spiritual experience might be improved by davening louder, we have to take into account the people around us, and we're not allowed to give ourselves a better spiritual experience at the expense of others, and we always have to worry about other people, especially in synagogue. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to comment on Facebook or to send me an email at shaulrosenthal@gmail.com, and have a beautiful evening.